Okay, so far now you've answered a few questions and completed your first product of evidence. How's that for, about half an hour into the course? We just throw you right in the deep end and start swimming. Look, it really is best to just get in there, start using these documents, and you'll find that as I'm explaining it, you're understanding why and getting the theory built around it. So well done so far. I'm just going to stop now and explain the principles of assessment and rules of evidence, because you'll notice if you double click down to John's assessment, there won't be nearly as much guidance for you, and I'll explain that to you by opening up. Now this is your copy and I suggest that you download it and save it. To this day, this is still like a Bible to me. I have it in front of me in a frame. I'm always, when I'm training, even when I'm assessing and validating, have this particular document always with me to double, triple check. Now on the left-hand side, you'll see the principles of assessment. So while you're planning your assessment, you're thinking about the principles of assessment. So when you're planning your learning and your delivery, so we'll get back to that later on in the course. The thing that I'm drawing your attention to now is this concept of sufficiency. And this is about is there enough evidence to show that the candidate can consistently perform the required tasks? So this is about you with John's one and doing it a little bit more independently on your own, that you can consistently perform the task of completing an assessment plan. Okay? Now the other thing too is we have to think under the rules of evidence about whether the learning is authentic. So it was fairly heavily guided on and modelled how to complete Susan's assessment plan. So it's really important that it's your own work, and that's why I'm just pulling back the reins a little bit, especially at a Certificate 4 level, so you can actually have a good go yourself. So that's just me stopping for a minute to explain why, we're probably loosening the reins a little bit there. So we'll look and give you a little bit of information now about John, and then you can click into the assessment plan while it's still fresh in your mind how to complete assessment plan. By all means, at any time, go back, replay the YouTube on how we completed Susan's and the reasons and the information around it if you need to. But I will be giving you some information now on John, and you can independently go and double click on John's assessment plan and complete all of those fields. So here's John. He is new to the transport and logistics industry. So he's working for a small business owner called Mike, who owns Mike's Bikes. And that's a warehousing company, and Mike's Bikes supplies a lot of stores all over Queensland. So that isn't a necessary bit of information, just trying to give you a little bit of background there. Now, John is pretty new to Mike's business. At the moment, he just runs some general errands and does a little bit of labour, and Mike is having a little bit of difficulty in John understanding the safety rules because there's forklifts in the warehouse. Unfortunately, John doesn't quite understand and value the importance of staying in the pedestrian areas only. And there's been a couple of near misses with poor John here, and Mike's a bit at his wit's end. So that is another purpose of training, is to actually change that attitude, to improve that attitude, and that's probably as a trainer and an assessor, that's probably confidential information you'd have at the enrolment interview if your client was in fact the employer. So this is a very, very different case study to the case study with Susan, who off her own bat paid out the money. Her employer probably doesn't even know that she was doing the Certificate 4 in training and assessment. Whereas with John, this has really been directed by his owner, Mike, and it's for very different purposes. He doesn't even need to complete a whole unit of competency. He at least wants a short session or a couple of sessions, so at least John can be safe in the workplace. So John's got some other characteristics here. English is a second language to John, so he will need some support. We call that LLN, language literacy and numeracy. So I want you to have a think about what type of reasonable adjustment you could make. So if John would not be very strong at reading and writing, you know, perhaps you could look at introducing a translator from the workplace, because there's no unreasonable cost there to Mike. But, you know, I mean, if Mike's serious about safety and there isn't anyone available, a translator would have to be paid. So at least John could clearly understand in his primary language why sticking to the pedestrian areas is absolutely essential to his safety there. Now, the other thing is, it's possible that if Mike goes well with some initial training, I beg your pardon, if John goes really well with some initial training, Mike will probably consider giving him putting him through a full forklift license. So a license to operate a forklift truck is the course that we're going to be looking at for John. So at this point, I'll give you a little bit more information so you can start writing it down as if I'm the client, and you know, we're having an interview here and you're finding out my needs from Mike's Bikes for this candidate. So just take down some little handwritten notes there. We can give John access to the workplace, so he can actually access the forklift and forklift area during 6 p.m. to 6:30. That's during a shift changeover. So that's one of the requirements, one of the needs of the client now being the organisation, the employer. Okay, so it's not just the learner that's the client, it's also the employer that's the client. So we'll have to make sure that that goes into your assessment plan as well when you're thinking about the timing there.